successful and rich, but he is lonely. So when a confident party guy, John Stark, moves in across the hall, things seem to be getting better for him, until one day Stark asks for a favour. Hi, my name is Shar, and this is the And Other Stories podcast, where I read stories of the supernatural and criminal, both real and fictional, works of fiction written by me. Stark. I look down at my orange jumpsuit and can't help but weep. I am trapped and imprisoned in every way possible, even chained to the man in front of me as we shuffle to the yard. I say yard, it's just a dusty square of land with barely enough room to jog round or kick a ball. All it is a good excuse for the gangs to fight under the glaring hot sun. I don't belong here. Sure, that's what they all say, but I'm telling the truth. The guard watches me through his aviator sunglasses, chewing his tobacco, and I know what he's thinking. I'm the one to watch, the dangerous guy. He couldn't be more wrong. I was a victim of circumstance, a victim of Stark, and now I've got life behind bars. 4 years ago, I was the most boring guy you could ever have met. Sure, I had a good place in an apartment on 5th, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city, but I was lonely. All I did was work, eat and sleep. Well, I like to watch television too. Cop shows were my favourite, or anything with gangsters. God, how I miss television. Normal television, I mean, not the lame shows they let us watch for an hour after supper. Back then, I would sit there with my TV tray for one, and watch until I couldn't hold my eyes open any longer. Then I would go to my queen-size Egyptian cotton sheet bed and sleep alone. At 5 a.m. I would be heading to work again. First one in the office and last one out. At least it was enough to pay for my 1,000 square foot apartment in the city, close to work and in the centre of the nightlife. Not that I ever went out. That all changed August of '09. The air conditioning broke right in the middle of a heat wave. I was sticking to the leather couch, but I wasn't one to complain. I had decided to just grumble in silence when I noticed my Warhols starting to warp. That was the last straw. All the dollars I put towards maintenance in this building and the super can't even keep the aircon running. When I got to the basement, however, there was already someone there complaining. I don't care how you get it done, just get it done, he said smoothly, holding out his hand for the maintenance guy to shake and leaving behind a huge stack of cash. Right you are, Mr. Stark, he said, puffing out his chest, unable to hide the glee from his face or his eyes from the money. I'll get on to that straight away. 5 minutes later, the familiar rushing sound of air filled the apartment, and my hair was blown from my face as the sweet waves of a cool breeze danced across my face. I realised I should really thank this guy. He'd saved half my collection, not to mention my sanity. I'd seen him once before. He'd moved into 4B, right across from me. The building was divided into just 2 sections on each floor. One half looked east and one half looked west. Each had great views of the city because the apartments only started at floor 20. We were on floor 24. I knocked on the door quite loudly. I could hear music coming from inside. Stark opened the door with a burning cigar in his mouth. His suit was clearly expensive and possibly Armani. It's a suit I'd been eyeing up in the store for about 6 months. Behind him there was a party going on. Very attractive people were all milling about, wearing designer gear and drinking from champagne flutes. I could see a bottle of Cristal on the table next to some tall white lilies. Oh, I'm sorry, man. I just want to thank you for talking to maintenance earlier. The heat was really starting to bug me. I'm from 4A, right across the hall. Oh, hey, bellowed Stark. Yeah, you're the guy who started that petition to get the lobby painted, right? Yeah, that was me. Anyway, thanks again. I'll see you around. I had started to turn away when Stark said, Hey, no, why don't you come in? Have a couple beers. We're having a housewarming party. Come on, I insist. We are neighbours after all. What's your name, pal? I'm Steve, I said, hesitating in the doorway. These didn't look like my type of people. They were interesting and fun for a start. Come on in, Steve-o. I'm Stark, John Stark, but my buddies just call me Stark. And you and me were buddies now. Here. He boomed, putting his huge arm around my shoulders, steering me into the party and thrusting a beer into my hands. I didn't normally drink, but I was fast realising that Stark is not the kind of guy you say no to. It was like something I had never imagined before. Everyone at that party was someone, and I really mean they were someone. Models, actors, big-shot rock and roll musicians, you name it. Stark introduced me to everyone, and every time my beer ran out, another one would be in my hand before I even realised. Before I knew it, I was dancing on his designer coffee table with some chick that had just been in a runway show at the last New York Fashion Week. Head swimming, beer spilling, and having the time of my life. I woke up to the shower being turned on over my head. I had passed out in Stark's shower cubicle. Apparently I'd insisted I could turn water into beer using just the shower in my pants. "Time to move, Steve-o. You had quite a night last night," chuckled Stark. Squinting through one eye to avoid the bright bathroom lights, I looked up at Stark. He looked fresh as a daisy. I guess he'd had more practice than me. "Listen, I'm having some colleagues round tonight. Nothing big, just the usual crowd. You'll be there." It wasn't a question. "I dunno, Stark," I slurred. My mouth felt drier than paper. "I kinda have some work to do. I've got this presentation on Monday." "You'll be there. We'll have some beers. We'll have some laughs. You won't want to disappoint Tiffany now, would you?" I searched my fuzzy pounding head for some small recollection of Tiffany, but nothing was forthcoming. "Sure, Stark," I sighed, giving in. "Sounds good. See you at 8. I started to struggle to my feet and walked 3 steps before I vomited in the sink. I spent the next few weeks practically joined to Stark at the hip. The guy never seemed to work. He just had a constant stream of parties, all with beautiful people, all with the most expensive food, drink, and venues. He took me to exclusive underground clubs, fancy rooftop bars, huge private houses. The best part was that the women threw themselves at me. I tried to be a gentleman for the first 2 or 3, but then I couldn't resist it. It was a different chick every night. I'd been a good, hard-working guy for too long. This was my reward. That's when things started to turn. I should have noticed the signs, realised what I was getting myself into, but I was too far gone. I could never give up the endless high. I was turning up later and later to work. I figured they owed me. I'd been the hardest worker there for years. They could do without me for a few mornings, evenings, entire days. The boss didn't share my views on this, though, unsurprisingly. I was pulled up about 3 times before I went to tell Stark I had to cut it out for a few weeks, just until the heat was off from the boys upstairs. His face seemed to immediately turn dark. "You said you'd be there, Steve-o. 9 p.m. sharp. You'll get Carla, wait for the limo, and go to the club. And if anyone asks, we travelled there together, okay?" "But, Stark, seriously, man," I started with a half-disbelieving smirk, before he sharply cut me off, grabbing my collar and pulling my face to his expression murderous. "You will do this, Steve, or God help me, you will be fucking sorry." "Sure, Stark. Okay, fine, man. Chill, alright?" His face swiftly composed itself as he let my lapels go, smoothing them down, and he broke into a smile. "Great! Steve-o, my buddy, we're gonna have a blast. So you're wearing the boss suit tonight? You look sharp in that, my man. That Carla, man, is she hot for you? You want a beer?" His mood changed so fast I barely had time to register that anything had been amiss. After a short period of bewilderment and a couple of beers, the incident was soon forgotten. I figured he must have just been having a bad day, and the regular routine of clubs, games, and girls continued, until I caught a glimpse of Stark's business. I'd never questioned what Stark did for a living. I guess a small part of me knew that I didn't want to know. It was one Wednesday night when we were obviously going to some place I had never heard of until the small hours of the morning. I was running a bit late, so I dived across the hall from my apartment, beginning to sort my loose tie hanging round my neck, and opened Stark's apartment door without knocking. The sight in front of me stopped me short. There was a man on his knees looking at the floor, sobbing. Stark was standing there with a shiny metal object pointing directly at his head and bellowing unintelligibly. When he saw me, he drew the object back from the man's head and behind his back. He turned his bright red face to look at mine and said, panting, "Steve-o, buddy, you think you could just give us a minute? Just a guy, I know, we're just sorting some stuff out. Just a minute, okay? Then come right back." I stammered uselessly, staring back and forth from Stark's tense, sweaty face to the sobbing man on the ground. "Yup, I'll just, And I backed slowly from the room and crossed to my apartment. I stood just inside the door, sheer shock and complete confusion freezing me to the spot. After about 3 minutes, I heard the door to Stark's apartment open and hushed whispers. Then the door to my apartment opened. There stood Stark, face weary and threatening. "Now, Steve-o, you and me, we're bros, right?" I could only nod mutely, with only the slightest move of my head. "Right. So that thing in there, it was nothing. Just catching up, me and my boy working some stuff out. You get it, right? He said, attempting a casual air, but simply appearing slightly deranged. Again, I just nodded, but suddenly he was right in my face again, the dark, menacing sneer twisting his features. You will not tell anyone about this. You know by now, you're a smart guy. If you're as smart as I think you are, you'll keep your mouth shut. With that, he swept from the apartment, leaving me standing in shock. My last view, the glint of the silver gun still gripped in his right hand. Stark did what he always did after these encounters, acted like it never happened. I tried to distance myself slightly, tried to turn down a few parties, make excuses. However, this could only last so long. I was addicted. His disturbing behaviour had shaken me enough to know that something wasn't right, and that I should be running, far away, to never go near this guy again. But there was always a girl, an event, a glittering, star-studded party to draw me back. There was no question of running now. It was towards the end of September when Stark came pounding on my door. Some of the leaves were just starting to turn, the air was getting cooler, and my status on the nightlife scene was at an all-time high. I was fiddling with my cufflinks when I opened the door. Oh, hey, Stark, you're early. Listen, are we taking the twins to this thing tonight? 'Cause Tina's getting a bit full on, wants me to see her 2 nights in a row, and I just don't think... I stopped short at the wild look on his face. His tie was loose around his neck. He had some sort of dark stain on his shirt. Is that red? And he was panting. Beads of sweat ran down his forehead as he thrust out a box in front of him. It was black, with no clear handle or lock or even a hinge. Steve, listen, you gotta take this from me. Just keep it somewhere safe. It's something from work. The boss asked me to take it home, but your apartment's a bit more secure than mine. Stark, what are you on about? I asked with a half-nervous laugh, starting to give the box back to him. What's in it, buddy? Why would I look after it? Just do it, Steve. Why the hell are you asking me all these questions? Why the fuck don't you just do as I say and hide it? His face had turned hard. He clenched his fists as if getting ready to punch me, and a vein started bulging in his head. He drew himself up to his full 6'5" height and leaned over me. If you don't take this, he whispered menacingly, I can make life extremely difficult for you. I am not someone you want to displease. I took the box and stared at him with my mouth slightly open, eyes wide, terrified at the change that had happened so suddenly. I recognised this mood. Sure, I'll take it. You say a word to anyone about this and I'll fucking kill you, he whispered, his face mere inches from my own, blowing stale beer fumes at me, turning my stomach. Promise, man, no one. He looked up and down the corridor one more time, and then with one last threatening glance at me, he entered his apartment. I had an idea what was in the box. I was quite sure I didn't want to look inside. I ran to my wardrobe and hid the box under a stack of cashmere sweaters. Backing away, I sat down on the bed and put my head into my hands. What had just happened? What had I got myself into? I should have run when I had the chance. The next day I was on edge. I listened carefully for any movement from across the hall. There was nothing. In the afternoon, after I'd bitten my thumbnail down to a stump, I heard a loud banging on Stark's apartment door. NYPD, open up! I ran to the door and, careful not to make a sound, I looked through the peephole. 5 uniformed officers were standing with guns outside Stark's door. I held my breath and didn't move. Stark opened the door and the cops instantly had him on the ground. You were arrested for the murder of Tony Angelo. You have the right to remain silent. I backed away silently, turning and fleeing to my bedroom. I had to look inside that box. There was no choice now. Using the penknife I had received on my 10th birthday from my dad, I prized open the box. Inside, cushioned by satin, lay the silver gun. Along the barrel there were spots of the same dark substance I'd seen on Stark's shirt. With a wave of nausea, I threw the lid closed and pushed the box back deep into the wardrobe. I crouched down beside my bed, trying hard to control my breathing. I must have sat there trying to figure out a solution for hours. It was dark outside when I heard the loud footsteps of designer shoes on the tiled hallway outside. I heard them get closer, then pause just outside my door. I gripped my knees close to my chest, praying he would not come in. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard the footsteps turn, walk towards the opposite side, and then the key turn in the lock. They had let him go. Of course they'd let him go. They had no murder weapon. I did. I knew what I had to do. This had been the ultimate wake-up call. This man was dangerous. He needed to be locked away for good. I stood up slowly with aching joints. I reached onto the bedside table to the phone and started to dial. It sounded odd. The dial tone stopped and started, and there was a quiet clicking noise. I slowly replaced the receiver. I knew that sound. It had been on all of those shows I used to watch before Stark moved into the building. It was the sound a phone made when it had been tapped. I ran out of the bedroom to the bathroom and locked the door. A cold, sharp claw had started at the pit of my stomach, slowly crawling up my esophagus, clawing at my throat, and finally clamping my brain in its icy grip. Terror seized every joint in my body until I shook with uncontrollable tremors. He had killed someone. He had killed someone, and now he was tapping my phone, watching me. From that day on, I never left the apartment, stopped going to work. The phone rang several times, but I ignored it, and it finally stopped. I didn't switch on any lights or make any noise. Fear had me trapped. On the third day, I was reaching breaking point. I was desperate, madness starting to descend. The loud parties had continued. Pounding music and mocking laughter bombarded my apartment from across the hall. He boomed in a gleeful voice as his guests left at 6 a.m, and I craned my neck to hear, as the guests' voices died away down the hall, the loud, steady breathing just outside my door, until he turned, took the 3 strides to his door, and shut it with a slam. My imagination ran wild. I saw him in every shadow. I woke to see his face glaring over me, only for it to disappear when I jumped out of bed. Then a miracle happened. I heard him leave. I froze. I heard the door open, the key in the lock, then his footsteps walking down the hall. This was my chance. I could run to my car, get to the police. They could protect me. I sat still, listening, making absolutely sure his footsteps had disappeared. I ran to the wardrobe and grabbed the box. I sprinted to the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, and hauled open the door to the parking lot. It was dark, lit only by a few fluorescent bulbs. Taking care to look all around me, I ran to my car. My hands shook as I tried to get the key in the lock, dropping them twice. The safety of the car was comforting and familiar. The smell of the leather and the glow of the dashboard started to soothe me. I threw the car into reverse and looked in the rearview mirror. There he was, about 20 metres back, a silhouette standing with his hands in his pockets, feet slightly apart, the only thing visible the glowing end of his cigar. I choked on my gasp as I leapt out of the car again, leaving the keys. I stumbled to my apartment and locked the door. I sat curled on the floor of the bathroom, grasping my hair and rocking back and forth. He would never let me go. Even if I had reached the police, they had questioned him and let him go. As if there was any chance he had left prints on that thing. He could blame it all on me. I had it, my prints all over it. As if a light had been thrown on from my subconscious. I knew that's what he had intended to do. It was far too obvious. And if he didn't intend to do that, then his only other goal was to torment me until he killed me. There was nothing I could do. Frantic cries left my throat as I sobbed in my terror and despair. My eyes rolled wildly in their sockets, searching for a way out. As I had entered the bathroom and thrown myself on the floor, the box had been flung open. My eyes fixed on the silver gun, the blood still clearly visible. My breathing slowed and my hands loosened from my hair. It was the only way. It was him or me. I was on my feet in an instant. Striding to the kitchen, I grabbed a bottle of Bacardi, sat facing the door, and waited. The sun was setting and the bottle was empty when I finally heard Stark jingling the keys for his door. I heard the familiar pause at my door before he went into his own. I rose quietly and staggered towards the door. "Stark!" I shouted, gun in one hand, my other hand in a fist, hammering his door. He opened it with a smirk on his face, leaning lazily against the doorframe. I raised the gun, waving it in his general direction, double vision preventing a good aim. The smile melted from his face as he took in the scene. "I know what you are, Stark," I mumbled, slurring my words, sobbing. "I got you, though. I'm going to get you first. You think you can hurt me, do you?" I thrust forward at him, pointing the gun in his face. As I lunged, so did he, reaching for the gun. He grasped it in his large hands, a smile of triumph spreading over his arrogant face as he started to twist the gun out of my hands. But suddenly, bang! The gun went off in my hands. Stark doubled over, fear and pain contorting his features. With both of us still holding the gun, Stark slid to the ground and released one last exhale of air, his eyes staring glassily to the ceiling. I dropped the gun, falling backwards to the floor, scrambling backwards, trying to escape from what I had just done. I sat, head in my hands, gasping with huge sobs of fear as a pool of blood steadily grew on his marble floor. I had killed him. The cops said it was an open and shut case. I was found with the murder weapon of a previous killing linked to my building, beside a victim who I had just shot. I didn't even have a chance. Stark got me in the end. Thank you for listening. I hope you liked it. I am Shar, and this was the And Other Stories podcast. See you next time.